Oh, those audio spikes. Powkiddy is very good at churning out new devices every few months or so, with differing amounts of quality between each product they make. Here I have the Powkiddy X18S, which I only actually bought because the Odin got delayed. The state this thing is in right now, after I've done a bunch of customizations to it, is not the state that it comes in, obviously. I've done some customizations to get the stock firmware that this comes with off of here and replace it with Lineage OS. And while it wasn't easy, it took a bit of Googling and a lot of time to try and figure out how to get right. It definitely was worth it. Lineage OS is like a must install for anyone who buys this device. The stock firmware isn't horrible, but it's not great to try and get around. Lineage OS provides a much smoother experience, and it's generally just nicer overall. But is this thing really worth it still 2 months later? That's the question I seek to answer today. So let's continue. The screen on this thing is great for what it is. It's a touch screen, which is a necessity for Android devices. The RGB 10 Max doesn't have a touch screen. And this thing also has a port of Lineage OS, and I tried installing it, but without a touchscreen, using a fake mouse and cursor, and not really having the best user experience, it's not really worth it. So I ended up just putting RetroOz on this thing. But the X18S is very much usable and very smooth with Lineage OS installed on it. But the buttons aren't great. I really wanted to try and replace some of them because there's like mods you can do for this thing. But I know if I open this up that I'm just going to strip a screw or break something, so I'm going to pass for now. But maybe someday I'll open this up and try and make the quality of these things better. But since I'm not doing that, it leaves me with a less than ideal experience, as the face buttons barely feel clicky. It kind of feels like I'm just pressing like a slab of plastic against a piece of cardboard or something like that. And it's not very like nice to touch. Like it feels kind of like a button, but it doesn't have the same resistance as like a button they already, well, actually no, they didn't perfect it. It feels the same on the RGB 10 Max. But like say a GameCube controller, that thing has much more resistance than these buttons have. Obviously the buttons are bigger, but they feel much better. The face buttons, like, they barely feel clicky, and the D-pad is even worse. It feels like just a piece of plastic. Like the center is a button, but then the sides are bad. I hate it. I never use this D-pad. Maybe I'll try and get used to it, but like, can't you just make a good D-pad? The joysticks feel bad as well. I don't know if this is just because I've been using this for a little while, but on my left stick, the like plastic or whatever on top of here, or rubber, just like now spins around. This might be the joystick like itself, but this thing, it just spins like it's a screw or something. The right side doesn't do this, it's in place. And the material feels nice. So if they didn't use the same material, why? And also if this is from me playing it, like for like a few hours a day at most, can you make sure it has better quality hardware next time? I'm pretty sure it's just the top of it, but I might be wrong. They like look different as well. The left stick is much darker. I think that could also just be from me playing it a bunch with like sweaty hands or whatever, but like the right stick feels so much nicer than the left stick. And the only buttons that actually feel satisfying to press are the start, select, and the top row buttons, which is very weird. Couldn't have just used the same like material or whatever you did for the face buttons? Because if this is what the A button felt like, I'd be very happy. But the outer shell does feel nice, which I guess is a plus. It feels as though if I dropped this, it wouldn't necessarily break. I think it would take more than just a few drops to break it. Now, throwing this at the ground, probably break it first try if you really tried. I hate how this hinge doesn't go back all the way. Like, I know some people like don't like it when the hinges go back all the way like they can on the 3DS, but no one played like this. Everybody played like this. You see the difference here? If you play with this screen all the way back, you're gonna get like your fingers touching up against the back, which is uncomfortable. But playing like this was like always the most ideal experience for me. And this kind of feels uncomfortable, I'm not gonna lie. Like, you can't play like this, because then the screen's facing downwards. You play like this, which you hold your hands uncomfortably then. I wonder if there was something in like the manufacturing of the device that made them do this. I wouldn't be surprised, but like, I just wish it went back all the way. Like, what do you think would happen if like these ridges there that are like trying to stop it, what if I just like sanded those down? Do you think it would affect the device at all? Like, probably. I mean, I spent $170 on this thing, and I don't have like that disposable income, so I'm not really gonna try it out, but I'm kind of interested. Maybe one day. Or probably not, because they'll probably stop selling this device in like a few years max. But who knows? Maybe I'll have some disposable income by then. I technically do have disposable income because I don't pay like taxes or anything, and I still live with my parents. But I don't have like thousands of dollars to spend. I just wish I could go completely flat with the Hinge if I wanted to, but you can't. Also, the ZR. Oh, in the script I wrote like ZR and ZL and like normal L buttons. They're called R1 and R2 and L1 and L2. So I guess I messed that up a little bit. These L2 and R2 buttons, they click really nicely. I kind of like it. Like, they do have a bit of travel, which I don't exactly like, but it's not too much. It's like a nice amount. Now, on the other hand, these L1 and R1 buttons, they don't really click as nicely. They feel more mushy, and they travel a bit more. Like, they aren't like Xbox or PlayStation controllers that rely on like the sensitivity of like how much you've pushed it down or whatever. Like the 8-bit Do Pro 2 or whatever does that. This thing has like the amount that it those travel, but it's not like sensitive to that. It's like it's literally a button. So that's really annoying, especially in games that rely on triggers. Like Mario Kart, that's really annoying because like I'll push down and I'm trying to drift. It might take a few seconds before I actually drift because of the amount that I have to push. Like, why don't you just go with fully sensitive triggers then? I don't think I talked enough about this hardware, like the outside shell in the script that I wrote. So I kind of want to just talk about it here. I know a lot of people would prefer like a flat top on top of here like other devices have, but I kind of like these ridges here. Kind of give it more character. And also, I kind of like that this isn't just kind of like a circle. Like, there's kind of like flat edges here. Like, I know that can be a pain to some, but I kind of like it. The bottom is completely flat though, which is to be expected. So the hardware is mediocre and so is the software. So you shouldn't buy this thing unless you're willing to tinker around with it for a few hours maybe after you buy it. The hardware mods are more so optional. I haven't done any of them like I've said, but I hear they improve the quality of the device. I'm pretty sure Retro Game Corpse has a video on that, so if you want to check that out, go to his channel. Stay here for the video though, I want that watch time. But something I haven't exactly touched on yet, like I've mentioned it I think a little bit, but not too much, is emulation. You might actually be surprised to know that a lot of GameCube games and 3DS games actually run pretty well on this device. Now, not everything's gonna run very well. Obviously, some games are gonna have stutters, especially if there's a lot of stuff on screen at once. But I'd say all of like Nintendo and Sega and like those consoles up to like the N64 era run like perfectly fine. Maybe with a few exceptions, but it passes the Yoshi's Island test. So if you're getting this to just play like 2D games and like early 3D games, this thing is worth it. But also, just like pick up one of these. The RGB10-2, I think is what it's called, was released by Powkitty like a month after I bought this one, so I was pretty mad about that. But you could buy that. It'd probably be a better deal anyway. The reason I actually bought this thing though was to play Dolphin and Citra even. We'll talk about Citra later. Let's talk about GameCube games now. So I have 3 different versions of the Dolphin app on here. One of them is just the stock Android Dolphin app that you can get on their website, or maybe even the Google Play Store, but I haven't looked there. Dolphin MMJ and Dolphin MMJ2. The reason I have 3 is because some games work better on one of them than the other 2. So I just like having more compatibility. Getting older games like GameCube games to run on like such small devices is a very big like success. I only have a handful of GameCube games on this device, but doing some tinkering in the GameCube settings, all of them work very well. But keep that in mind if you're thinking about buying this. Not all games will play great right on the emulator. Like, a lot of them will, depending on the emulator you're using. But you might need to do a little bit of tinkering in the game specific settings, so just keep that in mind. This thing can only really do base graphics and like speed for the GameCube, but I don't really mind, as I have a lot of, I weirdly have a lot of nostalgia for GameCube games, even though I was born 5 to 6 years after the console launched. And for the longest time, the only GameCube game I had was Luigi's Mansion. But Luigi's Mansion is my favorite game of all time. I can be nostalgic for whatever I want. I know in the past I've mentioned playing Wii games on this device, but they don't run at full speed and they're barely playable actually. So I wouldn't even recommend trying them at all. You can, but I don't really recommend it, as it's just going to be a poor experience. If you want to play Wii games portably, either buy a portable Wii by someone who mods Wiis, or buy the Odin. Though you may not get it for a while. You should have bought it back in August when I did a video on it. The 3DS games were only really in my tests a few days ago as of recording this, but I've actually found some 3DS games that work surprisingly well on this emulator. I only really actually tested them out because I was watching Taki Udon video from back in December or whatever, and he mentioned that this thing, if you're able to deal with some slowdowns, this device will be good for 3DS games. And I was like, really? So I downloaded the Citra emulator, and it turns out it is, just not with the base Citra emulator. Oh, something I forgot to mention in the script, but I guess I should mention now. This thing is a problem with rotation. It'll rotate if you go like this or like this. Oh, maybe not. Oh, yeah, see? But if you go like this, it just doesn't rotate. I don't get the issue. Animal Crossing New Leaf is running very well on this device, which is actually very surprising and also very worrying for me, because I was waiting till the Odin came out before I started getting addicted to Animal Crossing New Leaf all over again. But I guess I'm just gonna have to transfer the save file from this to that. So speaking of the emulator, I actually tried the stock Citra emulator for Android, but didn't work very well. So I googled it and found a unofficial Citra MMJ port for Android, and this runs games better than that. A downside it has is that there's no game specific settings, so if you set a custom screen size for one of the games, that's what it looks like for all the games. Sorry, you can't do anything about it. Maybe a future update, but nothing you can do. Like I said, Animal Crossing runs well. Super Smash Bros. Runs well for the most part, but then in some of the bigger stages, it runs at half frame rate. But then other big stages, it runs fine, so it's very confusing. Super Mario 3D Land runs well for the most part. New Super Mario Bros. 2 runs well for the most part, but the overworld map, the world map, runs slowly for some reason. And Tomodachi Life runs well. Those are the games I've tested so far, and they all run perfectly well. The Citra emulator has a weird relationship with Mii's, so all my Mii's just show up as corrupted, so I don't know what I can do. But the emulation is good for the $170 price tag I paid for this thing, and if you aren't interested in the Odin, I think this is actually a good device to get if you want to play retro emulators. But also, if you don't care about GameCube or 3DS and you just want to play old NES and SNES games, get one of these, or the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus, or something like that. Because those devices will be cheaper and probably better suited for you than this will. But if you are interested in GameCube and 3DS, get this thing. It's pretty cool. I didn't expect to actually like it so much, and I know I've kind of just pooped on it this entire video because I keep complaining about the hardware, the buttons and stuff, but the overall software experience, once I tinkered around with it, it's pretty neat. I wish it would come like this out of the box, but that's never gonna happen. So I heard it's also good for game streaming, but I've never tested that out, so I don't know. The hardware, the buttons and stuff on this thing, aren't the greatest, but I could get used to it. I probably already have, considering how much I've played on this thing already. But that's really all I have to say. Is it worth it for you? Tell me in the comments. And if there's another device you want me to cover, if my Odin doesn't arrive by next week, which it probably won't, leave it in the comments. And I will take a look at it. I read a lot of comments because I don't get a lot of comments. I read most of the comments. So if you leave a comment, I'll probably see it. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next week for a video I haven't planned out yet, because I'm really hoping my Odin but it ships by Friday or Monday. It gets here by Thursday. Bye guys. See you next week. Subscribe.